Hey guys and gals. So yesterday we started talking about fonts and some of the vocabulary words associated with them. Today we're going to start practicing drawing some different styles of letters. So some of you might be really good at this already, and some of you maybe have never done this before, or maybe you feel like you need some practice. So that's what today is all about. We're going to do some experimenting. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks, and then you're going to have some time to work. Okay, so please follow along with the video. At any time, if you need to pause and kind of catch up, that's totally fine. So some things that we need before we get going: you're going to need a pencil. Okay, you will probably want an eraser, and if you want to borrow one of my erasers in the red basket on the demo table, that's totally fine. And then you're going to need your portfolio. Okay, so go ahead and turn to an open page in your portfolio. It can be on the back of that note page that you took yesterday, or it can be a fresh page. It's completely up to you. Okay, here we go. Bear with me. I'm using a new iPad stand and it's kind of stiff and wonky. So I'm kind of learning here. There we go. Okay, good enough. So we're going to start with something called skeleton letters. Okay, so go ahead and write that down. Skeleton letters. And what skeleton letters are is basically a system of drawing bubble letters if maybe you need some help or some practice. Okay, so I want you to start with a letter. You can pick any letter really. I'm going to start with the first letter of my first name. So my first name starts with a J. Okay, so this is considered the skeleton. I draw a little arrow, and then I'm going to draw that letter again. And now I'm going to draw a bubble around it. Okay, so you basically trace around the letter. So do that again, kind of making a little assembly line here, because when I come back to my notes and my sketches, I want to be able to understand what I did. So in this step, we're going to erase the skeleton. Okay, so this is where you can take your eraser and you can erase that interior skeleton that you have. Okay, so a lot of times, like I have a lot of trouble drawing the letter S in bubble letter form. I will use a skeleton to make sure that I have the general shape correct. All right, so what I'd like you to do right now is I want you to make bubble letters. So bubble letters means that the ends are rounded, like we did up here, and I'd like you to just draw your initials. Okay, so my initials are JRS. So if you want to, you can try drawing them without a skeleton. If you need to, feel free to go back to that skeleton. Okay, so the ends are rounded. Looks like a bubble or a balloon. Okay, so next we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to go for a block letter. Okay, so block. And again, if you feel comfortable just drawing these without a skeleton, feel free to do so. I'm going to use my initials again. So for a J, instead of the ends being rounded now, they're going to be square. Okay, if you need to use that skeleton, that's fine. Ends are still square on the letters. Letters with an interior space like this, you're just going to put a little bubble on the inside. Okay, and lastly, my favorite letter, S. There we go. I always struggle with S's. Not bad. Okay. So, block and bubble are two very simple, or we consider them basic styles of bubble letters. Okay? Let's make it a little more complicated. Yesterday we learned about serifs. Okay, and serif means that the letter has little feet on the end. So we're going to practice putting little feet on the ends of our letters. And for this one, I definitely recommend using the skeleton system. Otherwise, it gets a little complicated. Okay, so I'm going to start with a J. And when I draw the bubble around, I'm going to include the serif. So then when I erase, I have this really cool serif bubble letter. So the letter R only has serifs at the bottom. If you're not sure about where a serif should go, feel free to just guess for today. There's really no right or wrong. Some fonts have them in specific areas, some fonts don't. Basically at the end. Okay, and lastly that S. Okay, so let's make it a little more complicated. We're going to try some cursive. Okay, now if you're not very good at cursive, do your best or do some kind of loopy handwriting. It doesn't have to connect. It can just be kind of loopy. I'll show you what I mean here. Or if you want to, you could probably go ask the sub for help too, just to draw your name out. Okay, so let's say I did Mrs. Stern. When I do this, I want to space my letters out. So the spacing in between is a little farther than maybe normal cursive would be. So I'm going to do Stern and just kind of that loopy handwriting. It's maybe not cursive, but it's fancy. Okay? So now, for letters that are connected, you're going to draw one big bubble around them. And it's really important to stay close to that skeleton, because with cursive, it can just end up looking like a blob. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to erase that skeleton. Okay, and there is a cursive bubble letter. Now for these, they just go back to normal. You're just going to trace these out like you normally would, and then erase the interior. They're just going to be a little fancier than a normal block or bubble letter. Just something a little different. Okay. So go ahead and take a minute, and I want you to practice. You can write whatever word you would like. If you want to do your name, you can do your name. It's completely up to you. Your portfolio is your place to practice. So if you feel like, I got the hang of this, maybe you choose a shorter word. If you feel like, I didn't do so great, then maybe you should either practice another word or try something a little bit longer. Okay? Art is a lot like sports, you guys. Like, you got to practice to get better. It doesn't just naturally happen. Okay? So there's cursive. Now, yesterday in our PowerPoint, we talked about outlining and guidelines, and these are really important. Remember, I talked to you about if you had ever drawn bubble letters and suddenly they're really, really big, and then, oops, you're running out of space, so they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So spacing and guidelines are going to be really, really important. Okay? So guidelines, let's write that down, is basically any space to fit your letters into. Okay, so I want you to start simple. I want you just to draw two parallel lines. Within those lines, I want you to draw your initials. They can be bubble or block, whatever's easier for you. You can still use the skeleton system if you need to. Okay, now I'm probably going really fast for you guys. So again, if you need to pause the video, please pause the video. Okay, so now we can get a little more complicated. Let's maybe curve the lines. But we still want to make sure the letters touch the top and the bottom. So by changing the shape of the guidelines, we're going to end up changing the shape of the letters, which can kind of be an interesting thing to do. Okay? Maybe we get even more complicated and we try a squiggle line. For this one, I recommend writing out your name, otherwise you kind of don't see the squiggle. So I'm just going to write Stern. So again, my letters are going to continue to touch the top and the bottom, no matter what. And again, I've had lots of practice drawing letters, so I'm going fast. If this takes you a little while, that's okay. It should. Okay. Then, if you want to get even crazier, you can try an enclosed shape. So think of something simple, maybe like a square or a circle or a heart. I wouldn't do a star, that gets kind of crazy. But now I want you to fit your letters inside that shape. Okay? All right, so that's guidelines. I'm going to flip this over. Another thing that can help is overlapping. So sometimes, no matter what, even if we space really, really well, we have to overlap our letters. And sometimes it's a style thing, so that we just want the letters to touch. So here's how I like to overlap my letters. I like to start with the first letter, okay? And then I like to draw the next letter really, really close. So if I were drawing a skeleton letter, I would put that skeleton right next to the first letter, okay? And I would make it touch that first letter. So it touches here and here. So that when I erase that, it looks like they're touching, okay? If I don't need a skeleton letter, I can just start by touching the letter previous and then starting my next letter. Touches there, I'm going to go around and touches there. So they look like they're stacked on top of each other. Now, let's go back to that idea of we have a certain amount of space to work within, okay? But we're running out of space, so our letters are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So we need to work on that, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to draw 2 boxes. And they don't need to be very big, but big enough to draw inside. Okay? So in the first box, I want you to draw a line going down the middle. It can be dashed or it can just be a really, really light line. Next thing I want you to do is draw 2 parallel lines on the top and the bottom. So this space in here is the space that I have to work with. Okay? So I want you to draw your name out. Okay, so I'm just going to use Stern as mine. And I want you to count the letters. If your name has an odd amount of letters, here's what you're going to do. Oop, that's my warning bell. Okay, so this is odd numbers. So I'm going to find the center letter. Okay, so it's E. So I'm going to start with the E in the middle. By starting with the E in the middle, I now know how much space I have on either side left to draw my other letters. So I'm going to draw the R, and then the N. So hopefully it's going to help you space things out just a little bit better. And sometimes, like if you have a really long name like Mackenzie, like it's always going to look squished. Okay? Now let's say you have an even number. So like my best friend Sarah, she has an even number. So again, I'm going to draw the dash line down the middle. I'm going to give myself 2 parallel lines at the top and the bottom. And now I have to find the center of Sarah's name. Now she doesn't have a letter that fits in the center, so I just split it in half. So this is that halfway line. So I have an A and an R on either side. So I'm going to start with the R, and then the A. And now I know that this space remaining is for the S and the A. Okay? Now you can do really cool things with guidelines like this. So let's say I drew another box up here. Maybe for people with long names, you don't go side to side. Maybe you go diagonal. So I'm going to draw my 2 parallel lines and then the dash line. Okay? I'm going to do Stern again, so I'm going to start with the E in the middle. Then go to my R. Then a T. So these guidelines can help us do a lot of different things. And depending on what we need, we can change them to fit. So now my name's going diagonally within that box. Okay, the last thing that we're going to need to practice today, if we get to it, is value. So this is one of our elements of art. We're going to be practicing value with shading, so pressure. So the harder I press, the darker my color is. The lighter I press, the lighter my color is. So I want you to draw a rectangle, and I want you to put 4 lines in it. Okay? Starting on the right, this is going to be the dark end, and it's going to get lighter. So I want you to press really, 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 really hard in that very left square. Okay? Now, as you go down the boxes, I want you to get lighter and lighter and lighter. And you can just do this with your pencil. If you have leftover time, try it with a colored pencil. It's going to be a little bit different. So you can see I'm coloring really lightly and I'm doing a couple of layers. This is the best way to do this. You can always add more color, but depending on the medium that you're working with, it's hard to take it away. And you may need to go back and adjust some layers that you do. That's fine. Okay, so it gets darker lighter, 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 right? Now what I want you to do is draw a rectangle, and without creating sections in it, I want you to take your pencil and I want you to go from dark and practice shifting your hand pressure to light. So without any sections to guide you, get lighter and lighter and lighter. Okay? Now I also want you to practice staying in the rectangle. Okay? This shouldn't be messy or sloppy. We have to practice staying within a space because we will use this technique for class. If you didn't get it the first time around, practice again. Okay? You will have time. So if you finish all of this side, okay, and this side, you have free time. That means you could read your book, you could work on your portfolio cover, you could free draw, or you could get a coloring sheet. Okay? Thanks for being awesome. I will see you tomorrow.